This is a Nerd Blaze conversation. So I guess I'll get started. The thing that I want to talk about the most, and I'm dying to hear your opinion on, Jeff. I'm just dying to hear it. Let's talk about the Joker origin film that's coming together really fast. What do you know about the Joker origin film?
I did not know that was in production at all. Being the layman that I am, so is it the what was that guy's the recent Joker from Suicide Squad? Jared Leto Joker?
Wrong answer.
Do I get other guesses?
You can try another guess. I don't know what other guesses you would have. Do you have other guesses?
Is it the Joker from? It was the campy Joker from the. Is it Adam West's Joker?
Caesar Romero.
There we go.
Is the guy who played the campy Joker. It is not him either. That's a weird choice to automatically straight go to. But hey, I like Caesar Romero.
Jared Leto or Heath Ledger, but he's dead. So
they have reanimated his corpse. That's what I wanted to break the news to you today.
They have the technology.
Just so he can make a Joker origin film.
Well, I'm excited.
No, anyway, that's not what they're doing with the Joker origin film. They're creating an entirely new origin kind of universe. As of right now, we have the DCEU, which is made up of films, Man of Steel, Batman v Superman, Suicide Squad, Wonder Woman, Justice League, all that jazz, and that's been established as the DCEU. Right now, they have about 150 movies in development as they keep pumping out ideas, but one of the most weirder ones is that a Joker origin film, not centered around Jared Leto's Joker that we saw in Suicide Squad, but an entirely different Joker. And it is rumored to play none other than Joaquin Phoenix. Is rumored to be. It's rumored to be this Joker, directed by Todd Phillips, director of all the Hangover films, and those. That's about it. And with rumored to be Martin Scorsese producing the movie. So it's going to be a gritty take on the Joker's origin story, set in the 80s, and not connected to anything happening right now in the DCEU.
Oh, it's in the 80s. Interesting. So is this one of those cases where the movie studios are making something that the people don't want?
Yes, I think so, because the one thing about the Joker that's pretty cut and dry, like you can have a lot of interpretations of the Joker, but one thing that's pretty cut and dry is that you don't know his origin story.
So they're doing the opposite of what?
They're doing the opposite. They're giving us an origin story film. They're basing it off of Alan Moore's The Killing Joke, which is set in the 80s, and which kind of describes his backstory through flashback. And it talks about he's a failed comedian who gets into some trouble with some mob men who use him as a fall guy, and then he falls into some acid and causes him to go crazy.
So then he did have an origin?
He did have an origin, but then there's a line in The Killing Joke where he says, if I had to choose an origin story, I'd prefer it to be multiple choice. So it sounds like it's his perspective and his memories of it, but it's probably not entirely accurate.
Still ambiguous, kind of.
It's still ambiguous. It's the one that's generally accepted as if Joker has an origin story, this is it. But there's still never a concrete, yes, this is how the Joker started, absolutely, hands down.
When did they start the production of this? When did they announce it, I guess?
They announced this a few months ago, and that's when I thought it was a joke, because there's no way about that it's going to come. Todd Phillips is going to write and direct a Joker origin story movie, not starring the Joker that they have. Okay, let's see and Martin Scorsese is producing it. Yeah, sure, let's see how this goes. But then just as things start coming together, there's call sheets out, there's casting sheets out. Robert De Niro is being eyed for one of the roles for the breakdown, and production is supposed to start in September of this year, and it's eyeing a 2019 release. So it's supposedly coming down the pipe, but we still don't have official confirmation about it, which is weird. We don't even know if Joaquin Phoenix is actually starring in it.
So do you think that the DCEU is just so behind the curve now compared to Marvel that they're just kind of trying anything? I mean, in terms of I guess critical praise, their only successful one really has been Wonder Woman, right? So
right.
With that knowledge, do you think it's weird that they're going back and doing an origin for a villain? when their other villain movie, the Suicide Squad one, did do super well? Like, what is this? What is this?
I don't think it's weird. On paper, I think it's definitely the best way to go. I think the problem with that is that they're still trying to make super successful financial movies, and they're trying to make as much money as Marvel films. And I think that's the reason why it fails, because the idea of focusing on villains and having backstories about them works because that's interesting. That's a direction for the superhero genre that we need to go in if we want to not have superhero oversaturation, like if we want some new things. But by DC using the most iconic character that they possibly have as the Joker for as a villain to have a backstory on, sure, that might get people in the seats, and it might make money because it's a brand name that's established. But I still think the better alternative is try to make a lower budget villain movies on villains that we don't really know a whole lot about. Like, pick any other one of Batman's villain. Pick the Riddler. Pick, even Bane's backstory is interesting and could make for a good movie. But focusing on the Joker itself feels like a cash grab, and feels like and especially not setting it in the DCEU is just setting it up for some confusion. Like, if you saw a trailer, because you didn't know about this till about 5 minutes ago, if you saw a trailer for a Joker film and it wasn't Jared Leto's Joker, but then that plays alongside a trailer for the next DCEU movie, which is, like Wonder Woman 2 or whenever Suicide Squad 2 comes up, and that also has Jared Leto's Joker in it, what do you think? As someone who doesn't know about it, how does that feel for you?
Yeah, I'd be pretty confused. I guess I would wonder, like, so this isn't in the DCEU? It's in the 80s, but, like, does that not make it a part of the universe? Or is it like...
It's supposed to be, because the Warner Bros. is trying to, or rumored to be, setting up a completely new label, and they're going to call it, like, DC Dark, and it's going to be separate from all from the DCEU. And that's... Okay. And again, that's a good idea on paper if their past movies were already successful. Like, Marvel could easily do this, because Marvel technically did do this with Marvel TV and having Daredevil, Jessica Jones, Luke Cage, Iron Fist. Those darker, gritty Marvel shows still technically set in the Marvel universe, but definitely have edgier, darker tones. So that's an example of them doing this correctly. DCU is jumping the gun again, and Warner Bros. Is jumping the gun again by trying to try out and sample a bunch of different things and see what works, and trying to jump the gun.
So it seems like they're trying to put their best foot forward on this, but by using the Joker, they're kind of betraying one of their biggest properties in a way. Like,
that's how I feel about it, because because we're going to have another Batman or solo film directed by Matt Reeves, which is still up in the air because we don't know if Ben Affleck is returning or not. We don't know if it's a prequel to the DCEU. We don't know anything what's happening with that movie. And then we also have like a Harley Quinn and Joker movie starring Margot Robbie and Jared Leto, like, in production. There's rumors that Jared Leto's going to get his own Joker solo movie. That they have a lot of balls in the air. That they just need to pick a direction, and they need to stick with it. Or they need to give us more information.
Yeah. So as sort of a casual viewer of movies and TV shows and stuff, I am not at all interested in exploring villains. No,
really?
Yeah, because I don't know. I think this is just a personal preference, but I also kind of think the general movie-going audience might be moving this direction as well. But, like, you tell me what you think. So, like, the gritty superhero stuff, I see it kind of as like it goes in waves, like the superhero genre in the film, right? So I think it kind of started off campy, right, with, like, I guess the original
Absolutely.
Batman and Superman movies. And then it kind of swung in the direction of dark and edgy. And then in the 90s to the early 2000s, it was mostly that. And then it kind of, I think, the apex of that was the Dark Knight trilogy. And then after the Dark Knight trilogy, we got Marvel movies. And then now the Marvel movies are kind of swinging into, kind of sort of back into the camp in a way. Like, they're swinging it back into the fantastical, the space stuff, the magic stuff, the really, truly weird shit in comic books is finally making its way to the big screen. So now it's swinging back into the camp, but it seems like the DCEU is still, and the Warner Brothers, they're still like stuck in that 90s to early to mid 2000s mindset where it's like they think that audiences want realistic and gritty and stuff like that. Whereas I think in terms of superheroes, and at least my preference is sort of the more weirder, crazy stuff. Like it's more interesting. Like, I mean, look at Thor Ragnarok. Look at, I mean, now you got Doctor Strange. Looks like Ant-Man's moving into some crazy stuff. Avengers Infinity War, I mean, that was a fucking huge success. And it tilted all the way like to space stuff. You know what I'm saying? So,
and are you saying it's a good thing or a bad thing?
I'm saying I think it's great. Like, because, you know, like I said, that's my preference. I kind of like that kind of stuff. And I'm just saying I think that Warner Brothers is just behind the curve at this point. Like they're kind of clinging to what they think superhero movies should be like, when I don't think the trend is necessarily going that way anymore. It's sort of like they're behind the trend in a way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, they're absolutely behind the trend, but that's how they're trying to not even catch up to the trend, but to create its own path. Because yes, I think in early attempts after Batman v Superman was kind of criticized for being dark and gritty, like too dark, and like Warner Bros saw how Justice League was coming together, and it was more of the same. They're like, oh shit, we gotta change.
Yeah, they
some
livened
stuff,
that up a bit,
like,
right?
because it's already in production. Yeah, and so they lightened it up. They made it more quippy. They made it more, family friendly in for lack of a better word. And we saw that Justice League was a huge disappointment for myself. I don't know what you thought of it, if you even saw it, but then they realized that they're not going to get anywhere by doing this. Like, they can't build a successful darker universe like they were initially trying to do, because there's a lot of people that don't respond to that, and they want to make as much money as possible. So then, but by lightening up like they did, that creates a huge mismatch of tones. So that also creates a failure. So the only thing they can do is branch out and tell stories that haven't been told before, or else they're just accused of copying Marvel. Let Marvel do all the space, wild, fantastical, crazy elements. But Warner Bros. Should tell more intimate, smaller stories and dig deeper into characters that aren't going to get, represented as well on like the Marvel side of things. That's why I think Warner Bros. Is heading in the right direction by doing this. I just think their topic that they chose isn't a good one.
I guess in the end, it's all about the execution, right? It could just
because at the end of the day, we're going to keep having Marvel movies, and we're going to keep having Marvel movies like this. And if DCEU, tried to branch off and do this thing and copy Marvel, and keep going at that, then we're just going to have more of the same thing. And that's what's going to eventually cause superhero saturation, because who's going to want to, it's like, oh, it's going to be the same thing happening. But by branching off on something else, then we have a, different avenue to explore and different themes to exploit. That's not the same thing over and over again.
Okay. Well, good luck to DC, I guess. I don't know. I think they have a lot of work to rebuilding themselves, but I guess it makes sense. They don't want to just be like what everyone else is doing. But I would like to see a hopeful version of Superman one day on the big screen, besides what we had before.
Me too, because there's a way to do that, of making him a hopeful character, which they tried to do in Justice League, but then the groundwork that they laid to get him there just didn't work at all, which caused the problem. Even though the character itself turned into a true version of Superman, it's like they bypassed a lot of steps there that made it seem not genuine.